Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to this episode of Mission Critical. Make sure to hit like below and subscribe for more updates from our show. Let's get into it. Hi, Jayme.
Hi, Lance.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm so happy. We were just talking before the camera started rolling, but I'm just so happy to have you here. I'm sure a lot of your friends have been on the show before, and I've been a fan of the brand for years, and just everything that you and your team are doing and your ultimate, like your thesis as a company and your positioning. I think it's so important and so relevant for where we are as a culture and as, you know, what we value as a people too. So anyways, I'm so happy you're here.
I'm so happy to be here. I feel like we're going to have a great conversation.
Yes. So for people who are discovering your brand for the first time, can you just briefly introduce yourself, tell us what your business is like today and the problem that you're originally trying to solve? Like, what is your elevator pitch?
So Everist is a hair, skin, and scalp wellness brand, and we are best known for creating the first ever shampoo, conditioner, and body wash concentrates. Yeah. So that is a totally new product that we introduced to the market when we launched in 2021, and there's like a crazy story behind the scenes in terms of how we launched it, but in terms of the evolution of the brand too since then.
Tell me this crazy story.
So I guess I got to go back a little bit to get started, but Jess and I, so Jess is my other founder of Everist. We're longtime friends. We went to business school together. We both did most of our career in the beauty industry. So we worked at the P&Gs, the L'Oreals. Jess worked for Revlon Professional Hair Care and kind of executive level roles. And probably around like 2018, we started, iterating on ideas, thinking about if we, could start something on our own. And at that time, and still today, but I think a lot of our messaging has changed. We were really motivated by, sustainability, the plastic waste crisis we were seeing in beauty, and trying to see if we could do something that was outside of the box. So we went on this really long innovation journey, and we ended up creating a really unique product. And I think the past couple years of the brand has been figuring out really how to explain this really unique product we created, and then figuring out how to scale that messaging. So it's been a lot of twists and turns, but it's been a lot of fun.
I mean, tell me about the education part, because the company and the products are so unique and different. And so how has that been, one, an opportunity, but also a challenge to re-educate?
Yeah, it's like so hard to do something totally new and different, but I also think it's super worthwhile. And I think the way that we got here was what led to such an innovative product. I think a lot of people, especially in the beauty industry, there's a lot of brands kind of inspired by, things that exist. And the way that Jess and I approached it was almost backwards to that. We were really motivated by this problem and by wanting to solve kind of this impact problem of, waste in the beauty industry. And because we came at it from a totally different angle than everybody else, it led us to create this really interesting product. So to give a little bit more context on what our concentrates are, traditional shampoo, body wash, conditioner for your hair is about 70 to 80% water in a plastic bottle. So what our concentrates are is we took out the water, we concentrated them down to a third of the size, and we put them in a base of moisturizer, so aloe vera and glycerin. So these really interesting cream concentrates that you activate with the water in your shower, as opposed to shipping the water around the world. So an easy way to understand it is almost like if you took a shampoo bar and you like ground it up and you put it in your moisturizer.
Right.
So it's like a very novel form factor. And we didn't launch with that form factor in mind. As I mentioned, we launched with the problem in mind. How do we solve this plastic waste crisis in beauty? And we went through probably 100 iterations of companies it could be. At one point we were launching a Bulk Barn meets Sephora retail store, and then we looked at a milkman model for packaging refills. Then we looked at shampoo bars. We looked at so many different things, but I think for us the goal with Everest has always been how do you create something that's better for people and planet, but how do you make something that has mainstream appeal? Because we really want something that could scale, that could appeal to that beauty loving consumer, that had all the cues that we love from our prestige beauty days, the sensoriality, the lather, the scent, so that it had the potential to go mainstream.
Yeah.
And that brought us on this really interesting innovation journey where, we were trying to do almost like a mix with water yourself shampoo. And we're nobody's going to use this. It's so complicated to mix it at home. We're worried about contamination. So we ended up mixing that powder in a base of aloe vera and glycerin and making a cream because it was closer to what people were used to using. And then that was really the start of a whole new category that we're opening up in beauty.
I guess that's so interesting. You learning about where to meet your customers and, how much they were willing to re-educate themselves or inconvenience themselves maybe,
Yeah.
or do something different, or just get out of the routine, right?
Yeah.
Um, what was the most challenging part of getting your consumer, your audience,
Yeah.
to adopt this new routine and understand that they're not sacrificing anything, they're
Yeah.
actually gaining something? What was the most difficult part of that challenge?
I feel like our biggest, well, there's a couple key like challenges. I think one of them is like actually making the product was really hard.
Yeah.
Just being like, we have this idea, let's meet with like, 20 different manufacturers. Who wants to like go on this wild journey with us? And everybody was like, no, it doesn't exist. Like, we're not wasting our time on you guys with the dream. So it took a while to like make it, then to perfect it, then to like make it really good and to scale it. So the product itself was like really challenging. But I would say like the phase 2 of the challenge was like figuring out how to explain it to people. Like when we launched the product, it was about waterless shampoo and conditioner, and it was very much like a sustainability story, and it felt very niche and almost like foreign for people. And I think one of the ways that we've been able to grow so quickly in the past couple years is just finding a way to explain the product that's more intuitive. So now, as opposed to talking about them being waterless and like what's not in the product, we focus instead on what is in the product. So we focus on the 50% of the formula that's moisturizers, that's aloe vera and glycerin, which is what makes our products wet. It's what our patent pending is on. Nobody's done that before. And the benefits of that for hair, skin, and scalp. So explaining it in this like hair care meets skincare language helps people really understand it. And to be honest, like in terms of using the product, it's really not that different. It's like a similar gesture. You just have to use a little bit less and your hair has to be wet, really wet. But like, and the results are amazing if you can execute it that way. But I think there was this intimidation factor of like, it seems so different. And for us, it's been a journey of like, how do you make it feel more familiar?
Sure.
How do you make it less intimidating? How do you really explain like what's in it for the customer? And of course, that like sustainability piece is always going to be there. That's why we're building this company. But I think leading with a different message and putting the consumer and the performance piece first and foremost is what's allowed us to grow.
That's interesting because we've had chats with a lot of different founders over the years, and I feel like what has been a through line is especially a lot of the companies that are mission and purpose driven, leading with that can sometimes be challenging, but leading with a good product that is ultimately going to be
100%.
People understand is functional and they can use, and then also happens to be X, Y, and Z. That seems to be a learning lesson that a lot of founders have realized in terms of just how they're positioning and talking to their audience too, and not having to reinvent the wheel in terms of that conversation, I guess.
I think at the end of the day, it all comes back to the product. Like if you don't have a good product, people won't come back. You can convince people to buy once, but you can't get repeat business unless your product is really exceptional. And I think we have a really sticky customer who loves their products. That's allowed us to grow. But I think keeping that product first and foremost and that customer problem that you're solving, like at the kind of front of mind is really important. But I also think like they go hand in hand. Like for me, I love brands that are purpose driven, and I love brands that have a bigger mission that are more than just product. So I think it keeps it interesting from us from a brand point of view, from a storytelling point of view. I think it's why our community is so loyal. We have such great culture on the team. So I think it also has a place, but in this kind of attention economy, when you have a split second to get somebody's attention, like you really need to speak exactly to the problem they want solved to be able to cut through all the noise.
Yeah. Why, what made you decide on the name as well?
The name is like a fun one. There's like 3 different stories for this one. So the story that we always tell, the kind of external facing story, and this is also, they're all true in different ways, but the first one is, the Everist is the name of our customer. And we always wanted to build a brand with the customer in mind for the customer. So the Everist is the customer who thinks about the forever impact of the choices they make. They're a blue sky thinker. They think outside the box. They're willing to try new things. But they're kind of that like big picture thinker, really intentional about their purchases. So that's like the main, first and foremost story. I would say like the 2 behind the scenes stories is like building this brand. Of course, we knew it was going to be like climbing Mount Everest. We're doing like something totally novel and trying to disrupt an industry. So I think part of it was just our own personal journey. And then a funny story from like behind the scenes is we were building the brand and doing a lot of the concepting and the naming of the brand like during COVID. And I have 2 young kids. So there was always like Paw Patrol on in the background or something going on when I was working on the naming. And one of the characters on Paw Patrol is called Everest. So maybe somehow subliminally that like popped into my head. But,
Right.
Yeah.
Serendipity.
Yeah.
At what point along your journey, especially in those early days, did you realize that oh, we're onto something and this is getting traction and it's resonating with people, and we can really fully, not that you weren't fully committed before, but like,
Yeah.
like we can really fully dive in and embrace this.
Yeah.
Was there kind of like a moment, or did it kind of happen through osmosis through time?
Yeah, it's a good question. I feel like there's not one breakthrough moment, like a viral moment or anything like that. It's really been just like slow incremental building and like iteration with our community. So like we are
Mm,
so obsessed with customer feedback,
mhm.
talking to them, listening, especially when you're doing something like novel that hasn't been done before. Like we did so many changes on packaging, on formulas, on messaging, as we talked about, to help people understand it. So it's just been like slow, kind of intentional tweaking and building and iteration. And it's, growth is kind of built that way. I would say like maybe when we really started scaling, probably in like 2024, towards the end of that, like I did start like hearing about Everest from like people that I didn't know, or somebody, it would be someone's friend that I knew mentioned it to them, or somebody saw it in someone's shower and it was like coming from different ways. So that's always interesting when it's
So
like that
rewarding.
seventh degree of separation, and somebody's using the brand that I have no connection to. So
Yes, that
it's
must be
always
so
special.
rewarding though,
It's so
to see that.
rewarding. It's so rewarding. It seems surreal.
Yeah.
And of course, we've had like a ton of great, influencers post about it, and hairstylists that love it. So that's always great to hear from the professional community as well.
Yeah, yeah. So you and your founder both have history working in the industry before launching your own business.
Yeah.
What's like an unpopular opinion about the industry that you stand by, about the beauty industry in
Yeah.
general?
That's like a truth that like nobody wants to say.
Yeah, that you'll
Uh,
stand by. Yeah.
that it has to be aspirational, I think.
Mm,
Like I think beauty is an art form. Like every like marketing in every industry, there's like an art and a science. But I think that like aspirational element of beauty, I don't think it's an unpopular truth. But I
mhm.
think being able to sell the benefits, the results, the performance, I think is so important to people's attraction to the industry, especially when you're like talking about a premium product. That's really critical. And then the other piece that's like, I don't think it's an unpopular truth, but I do think like the science is really critical as well. The consumer today is so much more intelligent. I think they know how to do their homework. They look for like the proof points. So for us, like
Mhm.
being able to prove that out, having an advisory board of dermatologists, and have done all this clinical research behind the brand really helps it stand out.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the consumer is so educated. There's
Yeah,
so much more information out there, but there's also a lot more misinformation out there
that
that
is very
is
true.
misguiding people
Yeah,
around the choices that they
yeah,
make,
it's true.
around
Yeah,
ingredients. And so it goes to show just how important it is to have a company that is backed by
a hundred
actual
percent.
professionals and science and
Right,
factual data, right?
right, exactly.
Especially in this, AI landscape that we're in as
Oh
well.
my God, Wild West out there.
Wild
It's
times.
crazy. Yeah. What a time.
Is
Yeah.
there is there an idea that you had about the founder journey before you embarked on that journey yourself,
Yeah.
that you had in your mind that maybe turned out to be very different from what your perception of that journey would be of being a business owner?
Such a good question. Um, I don't know if it's been like that different. I think as I'm getting, I love podcasts. I
Mhm.
love listening to, I think I listened to every like founder story out there before we started Everest until now. I continue to. So I feel like I've tried to immerse myself in other people's journeys. One thing that I think has been really important, more than I probably would have expected before, is just like finding a way to prioritize your own wellness throughout the journey. Like I just say, like
Yeah.
keep your head on straight, because it is such a wild ride and it's so consuming, especially if you love what you're doing and you're so passionate about your product and your mission and the business. Like it can very much become an unhealthy obsession. And I think the obsession is what drives people and keeps people involved, but just finding ways to balance that out,
Yeah.
so that you can stay in for the long game. Because at the end of the day, like it's a long game. It's about staying in long enough to make mistakes and to learn from them and to iterate and improve. So just being able to keep yourself well enough to keep playing that long game is really important.
I remember an era, especially in Canada too,
Yeah.
but also in North America, I'll say as well, when entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs were becoming like this new category of like rock stars almost. Like,
Yeah, I remember.
and a lot of the headlines around like, I feel like every week there was a headline around a new company becoming a unicorn.
Yeah,
Like that
totally.
whole era of like, a lot of DTC companies
Yeah.
too. And there was this kind of conversation around like
It's like
hustle culture.
fundraising and
Yeah,
this
and
huge IPOs or huge valuations.
wild
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
But, I feel like that was kind of at the expense of well-being and understanding like
Yeah.
and putting these kind of expectations on business owners to one, try to get unicorn status in like a year, however long it took,
100%.
and
Yeah.
just not prioritizing their wellness journey. And I feel like now that conversation has changed a lot where, okay, it's, I feel like brought down to the ground level and
Yeah.
people are actually talking about how challenging that can be
Yeah.
too.
And it's not just the durability of the entrepreneur, it's also the durability of the brand. Like, are you building a brand that can last?
Yeah.
Are you building a legacy brand? Are you building a forever brand? Or are you building something that's, an overnight sensation, but maybe will, be gone in 5 years?
Yeah.
So I think it's really important to, in both facets, be thinking long term and to be intentional and to be mindful of, growth is great, but also just like balancing it with important choices that you need to make along the way, and just doing everything really thoughtfully, because I think that growth at all costs mentality, which was really much aligned with that time that you were just talking about, has changed, and it's very much focused now on like building intentionally, building profitably, building with your community. Like I think that's a much healthier place for brands to be.
Yeah. And I also think about those companies that were in the headlines. I'm like, I don't think some of those companies aren't even around anymore.
No,
To your
exactly.
point,
A
the
bunch
long
of
term,
them.
yeah.
I think like, what was the Allbirds is an AI company now? Crazy.
Even. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was one of those companies
Yeah,
too, right?
it's crazy how fast it changes. And I think it's like, I can't even imagine how challenging I think it would be for some of those founders as
Yeah.
well, especially when like, I think that's hard for, our generation of founders as well, because we know how important it is to be visible as a founder. I do
Yeah.
think, that's why I'm here. I do think people connect with people and people love to hear people's stories, and I love to hear them too. And that's what builds like trust in a brand, especially with this like AI,
Yes.
world taking off. People want to hear from real people and hear their stories. However, for us, who's also seen this generation of founders, especially female founders, be like built up and then torn down, it can feel scary to put yourself out there. And I also think from a brand building point of view too, like you want to build a brand that's bigger than yourself. I think Everest is not me or Jessica. Everest is, a whole different, animal and a whole different, proposition about thinking outside the box and putting our customer first and blue sky thinking and really like challenging the status quo in the beauty industry and thinking differently. So I think there's a whole brand outside of us, but I think our generation of founders has seen, that generation before us go through this crazy roller coaster, and it makes us approach it, I think, in a different way.
Sure. When you talk about having that long-term thinking in mind and like the long game, how do you maintain that kind of focus and perspective when every day seems to be changing so
my
rapidly?
gosh,
Like
it's so true.
how do you simultaneously keep yourself nimble enough
Yeah.
to adapt to kind of small and big changes happening on a daily cycle, whether it's tariffs or AI or
100%.
whatever,
Yeah.
but then also long term and just having faith in that long term too.
Yeah. It's so tough. I think like you have to carve out time for it. Because it's hard, like on the day-to-day, you get sucked into the day-to-day things and all of the problems, and you wake up with, the to-do list of issues that need to be, worked out. But it's about, carving that time away from the business. Again, this comes back to this like mental wellness piece, like making a little bit of space and quiet space, which I think for me is like hard to do. I think, I mentioned I love podcasts. Like every second of free thinking time, I want to jam more information into my brain because it's just how I'm so curious and I'm interested in everything, and I always want to know what's happening in culture. And I think intentionally and sometimes like painfully, like forcing quiet to have, it's hard.
It's
right?
a discipline.
It's hard. That's why I love like showers and baths. That's why I love like having shower and bath products, because like you can't have your phone in there. Obviously, you need to have time to think. You have time to reflect. It's like there's kind of like a guardrails around it, which forces you to like sit in stillness for a little bit. And usually that's where like the best ideas come from, and the clarity that you've been, something that you've been trying to work out, at your desk for a couple of weeks will just pop up when you don't expect it. So I think having that like quiet space is really important.
Stillness is hard, I have to
so
say.
Hard.
Especially in the culture and the world that we live in. I recently started doing like sauna cold plunge, and I did not think I would be that person that was really into it. But what I find really rewarding from that experience is that if you can't have your, well, I guess you can have your phone if you're like that person, but like
Defeats
it
the purpose of it.
forces
Yeah.
you to really
Yes.
disconnect,
Yes.
and you have no other option, and it is actually so refreshing to like
Yeah.
not be attached to like a screen,
100%. I totally agree.
um tell me about like what your week to week is like, because I know as a founder, day to day is like I'm sure different every day, but
Yeah.
on a week on average, like are
Yeah.
you carving out specific blocks of time to think more big picture and then blocks of time for more the day to day? Like
Yeah.
what has worked well for you?
I try to. I would say very often, it's hard to be disciplined sometimes because those blocks of time get eaten up by like the day's problems.
Yeah.
But I try to carve that time out. And yeah, I think for me, like just being, super organized with what I like the key things that need to be done in the day and doing them first thing in the morning is really important.
Mm.
And then also we have an amazing team. So I think, being together with the team a couple times a week and having in-person team meetings, like there's a lot of, osmosis that happens
Mhm.
when you're together with the team. And it's really important for things like trying products and like getting feedback on, textures and stuff like that. So that's really crucial as well. But yeah, it's hard, I think, sometimes, especially when you're growing quickly, to find that time for the long-term planning. But it's so important. And I think just in terms of like what we're working on, I think obviously there's lots of product stuff and building out like the panier and the product offering for the next couple years, but also it's just like the regular growing pains. Like the
Yeah.
company's grown very quickly, our team has grown very quickly. So, it's so funny because Jess and I, we came from corporate. We had to learn how to be scrappy founders. Like we were not good at that in the beginning. And then now we're in this like growth stage and we've never been in, companies this size. So we're having to figure that piece out as well. Obviously, we're able to pull in now more experts and, people, fractional people to help us grow and organize at this stage, but it's just like a forever learning journey. And that's also why I love it because,
Yeah.
they say entrepreneurship is the best personal development because every step is you just having to completely reinvent yourself, reinvent your knowledge and develop new skills. Like it's just constant. There's
One
no
of our
rest.
interviews this past week or 2 weeks ago, he was saying that to be an entrepreneur is to be a firefighter because you are constantly putting out fires here and there and learning to understand and also
Yeah.
understanding which fires to put out first versus
Exactly.
later,
Exactly. It's just like pick which one, like which one burns faster. That's the one you got to deal with now. And then while doing that, also like somehow making sure that like the bigger it's just like there's so many moving pieces. It's crazy.
Yeah. What would you say has been I guess the challenge between that you've overcome in your early days? Like what are the new challenges that come with scaling, I guess?
Good question.
What's a new challenge now that you didn't have to worry about before?
Yeah.
That has kind of put some different things in front of you, and then the other things that you were worried about the past, you've got it handled now.
Yeah, I feel like in the beginning was a lot of product stuff that we had to work through. Like obviously, it was supply chain, creating something novel. Like I have so many stories of issues we had with product in the first couple of years. Like we're making this like super thick, shampoo paste that's never been made before in these huge, mixers at the manufacturers. So it's breaking people's machines. It's bubbling over. It's so temperature sensitive, like 1 degree too hot, the whole batch is gritty and we have to throw out, thousands of products or, it's separate. Like there was no blueprint in terms of how to make these formulas at scale. So that was a nightmare for a couple of years, like working on that. And then now that we've got all the formulas stabilized, we have, a bunch of beautiful new formulas. And again, like a best in class innovation team that's like helping us really do things differently. So that's a bit more stable. But now I think it's a lot of team stuff and it's like structure and also an interesting, I think, point of view for like a direct to consumer first brand, like 85% of our business is direct to consumer, is figuring out like the retail, way forward as well for Everest. So obviously retail is a important place to be for a beauty brand. It's like an amazing place of discovery, but also making sure that you have the awareness, the demand generation when you get there, the flywheel. It's not, not something, especially coming from, the beauty world, it's not something we take lightly. It's something that, requires a lot of investment, a lot of preparation for. So just cracking that omni-channel strategy and also this like next frontier of the brand and new packaging that we're working on is a big piece of my time in addition to building out the team.
Right. I have more questions on that later, but when it comes to building a brand that's like rooted in sustainability, what do you think is something about sustainability and consumer products that a lot of brands get wrong or a lot of people don't understand necessarily?
It's a good question. I think sustainability is so much more complex than maybe people presume. And I think that, it's hard as a consumer brand because at the end of the day, like the most sustainable thing is to buy nothing.
Hmm.
Right. So it's about creating products. Like, first of all, like one of the most sustainable things you can do is make amazing products that people use completely.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that are like high performance and are really functional and like find a place in their routine. And also products that do more with less, which is very much like how Everest is designed. Our new brand platform is beauty undiluted. So it's about talking about, our smaller, compact, more formulas, but how like powerful they are. So
Mm.
that size impression is a really important one as well, because, there's so many ways into sustainability. There's packaging, which we have addressed with our recycled aluminum tubes and our aluminum tins. There's, the impact of like shipping products as well. So ours are smaller. So they have 77% smaller carbon impact because you're
Okay.
not shipping all the water. Then you can come at it from ingredient sourcing, then obviously like end of life, responsibility for all of the components. And then you can look at, ingredients in terms of what goes down the drain and how it,
Sure.
biodegrades. There's so many
All the
different ways
things.
you can look at it. So I think people oversimplify sometimes. But I will say, like, I'm grateful that, at some point, based on the way things are going and regulation that will eventually come here, like it's already in Europe, like all brands are going to have to think about this stuff. They're going to have to think about the wastewater implications of their products. They're going to have to think about like
Mm.
the end of producer responsibility of their packaging. Like all the regulation will eventually come, and it's a lot harder to apply that stuff later when you have a brand and reverse engineer it. It's much easier to start with that from the beginning, as we've done. So I'm really happy it's kind of been our first step.
Yeah, as part of your DNA.
DNA. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly.
Storytelling has been such a big part of the brand at the beginning, but also as you enter like these different chapters of the brand's journey.
Yeah.
How important, in your experience in your journey, like how important has storytelling been for us? Like, is storytelling for a small business owner? And what do you think founders need to get right about their own story in order to properly convey it or to properly, I guess, have to speak to their customers
Yeah.
in the right way, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think storytelling is critical. It's
Yeah.
so important. But I think also like the story is not just about you, it's also about the customer.
Mhm.
So finding, I think your story is interesting for people to hear. And like that's been one of the ways that we've really been able to scale Everest, is like telling the story of like Jessica and I building the brand and why we built it and like what we created. But then also like how does the customer, receive the product? How does it incorporate into their life, the benefits for them? And involving them in the journey of the product creation, like the iteration of the product, getting their feedback. Like they are part of our story as well. Our community has like really, truly co-created this brand with us and helped us, perfect it,
Mhm.
and even find out how to message it. So for us, the storytelling piece is key, but it's about more than, just our story. It's about the full story of Everest and the community around it that's building with purpose in mind.
Yeah. And when you are, talking to your community and getting the feedback from them,
Yeah.
how do you know what questions to ask them? What are the right questions to ask? And what are the right pieces of feedback to take in? Because everyone has an opinion about everything.
That's a great point.
How do you know what to absorb, what to deflect, and also what to even ask them to give you feedback on?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say like a lot of times you don't even have to ask, like the people will share their feedback. But then it's like filtering it with like, okay, some people are more likely to share feedback. So how do you, really, or feedback on certain things. So how do you, there are times when you want to ask and like really hone in on a certain thing. But I think people are willing to share. It just takes, you really have to carve out time to like listen. Like I still read every comment, every review for the product. We have a process where we have our customer service team summarize every single inbound email that we get every week, and then the team gets the document before like our weekly team huddle. Everybody's required to read it, and there's like dozens and dozens of comments and feedback, and then we get quizzed on it in the huddle by our customer experience manager Tamara, who's amazing. So
little pop quiz moment.
Yeah, so it's just everybody. I feel like the whole team needs to read this feedback because I think we need to be making decisions always with the customer in mind.
Hmm.
And, there's definitely certain things that they're more vocal about. And I think you do need to be disciplined, because I think in the beginning, I want everybody to be happy. I want to
Yeah.
incorporate every piece of feedback. And you do have to be selective about like what's realistic for your brand. But I do think more or less like of all brands, we've been, really open to iterating and improving as we grow. And that's because we're just constantly immersed in this feedback and we take it really seriously.
Yeah. Is there a piece of feedback or a certain customer that comes to mind that gave you feedback that really made you think about things differently?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say the biggest piece of feedback that we get for Everest is actually on the packaging,
Okay.
constructive feedback on the packaging. And it's an interesting one because that's really like the premise of the brand.
Yeah.
Everybody's like, can you just put this in a plastic tube? And we're like, no,
Right.
we can't. That's why we exist, because we don't want to use the plastic tube. So, it's really a tricky one because our formulas are so thick, they won't go through a pump. We don't want to use any single-use plastic. Like all the little plastic components we have a closed loop program to take them back. And we love aluminum because it doesn't rust. It's light to ship. You can easily recycle it, in different ways. So we're committed to that. So it's been interesting, like listening to that feedback, but also adapting it. So a couple of things we've done. So first we launched with our aluminum tubes, which is our biggest, packaging, type. But then we also launched a couple of years ago an aluminum tin format that's kind of a screw top tin. And that sneak preview is going to be evolving later this year to like a more custom shaped premium tin with a flip top and like a refill component. So we really have to like think outside the box on packaging, because we've been so limiting with, what we've said, is important to the brand, that we don't want to use, single use plastic. So we have to be really creative there. But yeah, that's somewhere we're always listening to the feedback and have to make choices in terms of what is aligned with the brand, but also keeping the customer happy.
Yeah. Finding that balance.
Yeah.
Tell me about also your first 100 customers. Like,
Yeah.
how did you find them? How did you, who were they? And
Yeah.
what did you learn from that first set of, let's say not 100 customers, your first 100 returning customers?
Oh,
The
interesting.
people that, were like your first set of like brand evangelists. What did you learn from them?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was going to say our
And how did
first
you find
100
them?
customers was like my family.
Yeah. We're going to say not including
Yeah.
family, friends, like your first ones that just came to you because of the
Like our
brand and the
sticky
product.
customers. Yeah, it's interesting. So I always say like Jess and I are like brand marketers who had to learn how to become, performance marketers to grow the brand. And now we're kind of layering that brand piece back in. So we launched, with a very brand forward strategy. So I actually think like when we launched in Feb 2021, we did a ton of PR because we wanted to really establish the brand, to establish the fact that we were kind of the creators of this, new concept and waterless concentrates, and kind of get that name out there of Everest. So I would say like a lot of our initial customers were like kind of those like, either they're like manufacturers or like innovation, beauty industry people that were like interested in new innovation and like global kind of interest in this new concept. So I would say that first wave of customers was just like curiosity customers, right? They like wanted to see what we were working on. And then in terms of like being able to find like our sticky customer, like this is where it took like some iterating. So we have probably like 3 segments within the brand. One is that original, Everest eco-optimist type of customer who's still there and like loves the values of the brand and our story and love that she's been around and so vocal and giving feedback from the beginning. And then there's like 2 other segments that have emerged. One, which is probably our biggest segment and is really sticky, is this Gen X woman who's finding her hair texture is changing and her skin and scalp is getting drier with age. And the fact that our formulas are 50% aloe vera and glycerin has a tremendous benefit to her hair texture, to the hydration of her scalp. She finds less, hair fall. So speaking to her and that problem is been incredible, and she sees real transformative benefit. So that's like a big demo that's we've grown with. And then also we have this like other subsection of customer who's got sensitive skin, and because her formulas are really, quote unquote pure, like they don't have any thickeners, dyes, like no synthetic fragrances, and they have so much glycerin, they're really soothing. So that's another customer that says, it's the only shampoo I can use that doesn't make me break out or get a rash. That's another like sticky customer group. So we have a couple different like segments that has taken us a while to like figure out who these customers are. But at the end of the day, it comes down to, solving people's problems. Like that's what you need to keep in mind at every moment, and understanding their problems and giving them a solution. So we're so grateful to have, that community in each of these segments to help us build.
Yeah. Is there like a marketing strategy or customer acquisition strategy that has worked really well for you and has been kind of like a successful internal case study?
A lot of it has been like through word of mouth. Like
Hmm.
we have definitely like scaled performance marketing. So that's like a big piece of it. But the reason that that has worked is because we've been able to tell our story of like Jess and I's story of like what we're building, and because our customers engage with our brand and our ads and leave their own testimonials on them. So, and also like a lot of them are like really vocal about, you know, their love for the brand and the benefits it's had for their hair and their skin and their scalp. So there's a lot of like natural word of mouth that happens. It helps, you know, everything become more efficient and has allowed us to kind of invest there. But also, you know, sampling, we're especially with like a new product, like getting trial is so important. So
Mm.
just getting it in people's hands, I think trying is really believing, especially with something that like feels a little bit like new and different and maybe strange in the beginning. Like actually trying it and having that experience is been really critical. So we do a huge investment in sampling. And then recently we've started to invest more in like brand marketing. So some influencer, PR, affiliate, layering that back in.
Yeah, yeah. I guess for any small business or brand that's regardless if they're in beauty or
Yeah.
in food and drink, like what do you think is a non-negotiable when it comes to getting a brand off the ground and getting the eyeballs on it that it needs to?
Mm, I think like having a story to tell.
Mm.
Like it's one thing like actually telling the story, but like the question is like, is it a story worth telling? Like
Yeah.
would you be interested in this story as a consumer? And obviously different types of stories are appealing to different customers. Like some customers are going to be interested really in those like heavy, you know, scientific stories. Other customers are interested in a real innovation story, which is kind of our story, you know, or it's a, you know, founder story. So I think just like finding a way to tell a compelling story is critical, because you can't, unless you have that, you know, clarity of like message and also weave into that story, you know, the problem that you're solving for your customer. It's just, we're just so inundated with messaging and media all the time. It's really hard to break through unless you have something that's different.
Yeah, point of view I think is
Yeah.
just so important. And also like if you're trying to be something for everyone, then you're
Yeah.
not anything to how does this, whatever that
Exactly.
saying goes,
Yeah.
like it's
Yeah.
like you can't be everything to
A
everyone
hundred
because then you
percent.
don't stand for anything at the end of
Yeah.
the day, right? So
Exactly.
yeah, point of view, perspective, and just understanding like what lane or lanes that you want to just
Yeah.
occupy.
Yeah.
Um Tell me about, your first hires and like what you learned from building a team and how, yeah, what were some of the lessons that you learned from that were good and
Yeah.
bad, like
Yeah.
in building a team?
I feel like we've learned so many lessons here. So I'm happy to share. Um, I would say like the most valuable lesson we've learned probably in the beginning is like the first couple hires really need to be those Swiss Army knives, we say, like
Yeah.
those really, you know, keen, smart, adaptable, scrappy team members that can do lots of different things and learn really quickly, and you can kind of move them around based on how the business evolves, because it continues to evolve every day. And then obviously as you grow, you need more specialists. But in the beginning, Jess and I's first hire was, you know, somebody way more senior than we needed with not a lot of startup experience.
Yeah, right.
And she was wonderful, but like we spent so much money and like didn't really have any output.
Yeah.
So I think it's about,
Yeah.
you know, we were learning on the fly as well. So in general, I love to hire people that it's most helpful when it's someone that's done something similar before. Obviously, those early profiles can like learn really quickly as long as they're keen to learn. But because we are, you know, growing so quickly and always entering a new phase of the business, it's really helpful to have people that have been in a similar business of that size to help bring some experience.
Yeah, yeah. And when did retail become part of the strategy? Like, a lot of it is direct to consumer, but
Yeah.
has that always been a consideration from day one, or when did you know that it was the right time to explore that?
Yeah, so we've always wanted to have the brand be an omni-channel brand.
Hmm.
So we've been in kind of this like really selective boutique, you know, retail footprint since I think like 2023. We entered the detox market.
Hmm.
We're in like Health Hut in Toronto, a lot of like boutiques. And that's always been part of what we're building. Obviously, you know, thinking about the brand as it grows and expands and how it could expand into a bigger beauty retailer in the future is an important consideration. But I still think, you know, it's nice to be in some of these retailers now where you can really spend time, watching how people shop. There's a whole bunch of interesting things we're piloting with these teams now too, in terms of like services with the brand and introducing like different scalp services or trial through service in stores with our hairstylist team. So lots of different ways we can play it. But retail, I do think, is important, but it's changing so quickly. And I think it's a huge investment. So being really thoughtful about that omni-channel strategy is really critical, and being ready for it. So it's not even like, I think D2C is one piece, and I would always recommend that brands start there because you get to have that direct connection with your community and you get to learn so much. You have all the, data, you get to ask questions and have that one-to-one relationship.
The control over your audience and your
Yeah,
product,
exactly. And you get to
the messaging.
learn, right? You can
Yeah.
just learn so much better. And then the next channel that we expanded to was Amazon. So we have like a really quickly growing Amazon business, which is great for replenishment. We were reluctant to go to Amazon. I was reluctant to go to Amazon for a while, but I think you need to be where the customer wants to shop, and our community was asking for that. So the business is doing really well there. And then there's a whole nother channel too that we're kind of digging into now before we even, really expand physical retail, which is this social commerce channel. TikTok Shop obviously is tricky for a Canadian brand. So we've had to set up like a US corp and like get all of our, organization ready to go there, but that's a channel that we're looking to expand into right now, plus like creator affiliate commerce. So that whole social commerce is like a whole nother channel, and I believe that channel has to come before physical retail because that's where now all the demand gen is coming from. So you really need to make sure you can understand that channel and be well organized to kind of drive demand through that channel, because I think it's driving a lot of brick and mortar sales as well.
Interesting. And also like with brick and mortar, or I guess retail through other e-com platforms, you're competing. You're competing for shelf or virtual space and the attention. So how have you learned to work with those retailers to be able to take up that space and talk to their consumers? Because they're juggling so many different brands at a given time. Yeah.
Well, that's the nice thing about Everist, is that it's like small. So we have great productivity for the little space that we're in. And I think it does stand out on the shelf because it's like a very unique and differentiated product. But as always, like our, being such a unique brand is, an amazing thing for attention, but it also can be challenging from an education point of view. So for us, it's about making sure that we have the education with the teams and around the brand in stores so that people really understand what it is and how to use it, about getting people to try it through like sampling or in-store services, and just kind of building that brand awareness outside of the retail store to drive demand in store as well.
Yeah. I guess what are some kind of real revelations that you learned by going, exploring that channel that that you think, anyone should have an awareness of or an understanding before they explore retail or even just omni-channel, whether that's like understanding how much inventory you need and have to set aside the finances of it? Like, what are those considerations?
I think like getting into retail is the easy part. Okay. And I think you need to be really thoughtful. Like once you're there, you have like a sales expectation to hit. So you need to be really thoughtful about how you're going to drive that demand once you get on that shelf. That's when like the work starts. Right. And there's really no margin of error for a lot of like the back end stuff, for like being out of stock on things or issues with operations or shipping. Like that all needs like integrations, that all needs to be like buttoned up before you get on the shelf. And then once you're there, it's about, okay, how do we move it off the shelf now? So making sure like you're training the teams, providing the right literature, ready to invest in the right like marketing programs with the retail partners. Like it costs money to be in retail. And it's really important too that you do like a full channel P&L, because sometimes depending on like the margins that you've negotiated with the retailer, like sometimes these channels they're not profitable channels, right? Everybody thinks you get into retail, you're like making a lot of money. Like sometimes you're not. Sometimes you're losing money in retail, depending on how you've negotiated, the deal and what you're investing in that channel. So, and maybe that might not even be a bad thing. Maybe that's your discovery retailer, right? Yeah. I think it's just, there's so many more things that you need to think about before you go into retail versus just, we got in, yes, like let's get there. I think being really thoughtful about what it takes to be successful there. and really you only get one shot.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important to plan that out.
We had someone on our podcast last week talking about retail, exploring retail and wholesale kind of partnerships, and they had built up so many great distribution channels with high end retailers.
Okay.
And then they explored, and this was like very early on, so like they had a huge order from TJ Maxx
Okay.
group.
Yep.
And they're like, oh my god, I've never seen this big of an
Yeah.
order before, and
Yeah.
went for it. But then it was in TJ Maxx stores
Yeah.
and Winners and everything like that,
Yeah.
and the brand perception of the brand completely changed because
Yeah.
they were being sold at, I don't, like Four Seasons and things like
Yeah.
that. And
Yeah.
those wholesalers or those partners were not happy. And it's
Yeah.
all to say
Oh,
that like
100%.
understanding
Yes.
what decisions you're saying yes to
Yes.
and which ones you're saying no to is also,
Yes.
and it can be so tempting, especially
Yes.
as an at the start of your journey,
Yeah.
to just want to say yes
To everything.
Yeah. So how have you
100%.
learned to know what to say yes to?
Making mistakes, like everybody learns everything. Yeah.
Yeah,
Just like
yeah.
figuring out as you go. But I think coming back to that, like carving out time for like strategic planning and like also being really plugged into the industry. Like the retail industry is changing in real time, every minute. It's evolving constantly with technology and now, shopping, AI shop. There's so many different ways that it's transforming. So I think having to be following that and then also carving out time for that longer term planning, but being nimble as like the reality is kind of changing in real time. But it takes discipline. It's really hard. And sometimes when you're a young brand, like you do need to say yes to things that you would say no to when it's like every, business or building a personal brand. Like you knew what you need to do in the beginning to get started, and then you get more choices, you become more established.
Yeah.
But I think the important thing is trying to make choices that are not forever choices or won't limit, you know what I mean? That you can kind of, bounce back from if you make a mistake versus things that are more permanent.
Yeah.
It's hard to decide at the moment which one it's going to be, but I think just trying to be a little bit more thoughtful there.
Sure. Zooming out a little bit, what do you think has changed since you started the company to today around the discourse, in terms of the discourse around beauty?
Oh, wow. So much. The
Yeah.
beauty industry is so fluid and it like changes so quickly, which I love because it keeps it so interesting. I think there's been such a wave, which is amazing, of this kind of really intelligent beauty consumer who wants to see the science and the proof points, which is incredible. So I think it allows brands that have like done that work, like Everest, to really stand out. And to, lean into their innovation. So I think that's a big one. Obviously, like the brand discovery has changed so much. Like when we started, there wasn't really this huge, TikTok wave, so that people are discovering there, but it will change again, and there'll be a different place of discovery in the future. But social commerce, probably tied to that, has been one of the biggest transformations, I think, of the industry. In the beginning, it's very much about certain retailers, and I think those retailers are still critically important and incredibly important in establishing the brand, but discovery happens in so many different ways now. So you just have to figure out, your customer, where is your customer discovering new products, and make sure that you can speak to them there.
Yeah. If you were, knowing what you know now and the journey that you've had, all the fires that you put out, all the wins that you've had, if you were to start a new brand today, or if you were giving advice to a small business owner that was starting a brand, what's the first thing that you would do to create your next Everest?
That's a great question. I think you need to I think having that like differentiated point of view is really important. And I think as much as it's been, most of our challenges have been tied to like doing something really different, it's also what makes the brand special and what makes people love the brand. So I would say it's been painful, but it's been worth it. So I would say try to bring a different point of view. And then I think we've kind of learned this lesson through messaging and testing all the different messages, but simplicity, like making sure your messaging is really clear and the brand is really consistent throughout, is a key one as well. And then also I would say just making sure that you're solving, people's problems and really understanding your customer and speaking to their needs. We say like people want to buy, I think it's a painkiller versus a vitamin. So find a way to, solve a problem that they're, dealing with. And we like to say, I want it to be a painkiller that looks like a vitamin. You want to be something that solves their problem, but also like looks beautiful and has, a gorgeous brand identity and a story attached with it. For me, that's like the perfect type of brand that mixes that like art and that science, that really understands the data and their customer, but also can tell it in kind of like a artful way with a lot of storytelling. That's like the perfect brand mix for me. So that's something we try to craft with Everest.
Yeah.
And that helps because there's two of us too. We each kind of bring a different perspective.
Sure.
Yeah.
You've achieved a lot of milestones, and so how have the goalposts changed where, what is your Everest that you have conquered already?
Yeah.
And what's your new Everest moving forward?
Yeah, it's always changing. It's always changing. I think just like getting the product to market was one of the biggest challenges, and then having, people really love the product and become, loyal customers has been the next. I think the next frontier of Everest is really, we're entering into, we call it like our beauty era. So we're working on, a rebrand where we reinvent, some of the packaging, and we begin to feel more beauty forward, tell more of those like science story and clinical proof points on like what makes the product so special and the benefits for hair, skin, and scalp. So that's really special to kind of come at it from a different angle and feel a little bit more like premium and elevated. This is, all rolling out over the next year or so. But at the end of the day, like the core of the brand will always be there. It's always going to be like our roots, our DNA, how we make decisions, what motivates our team and our community. So it's all about, making sustainability sexy and, whatever message we kind of lead with, but Trojan horsing it, inside so that it has the opportunity to become mainstream, because I think that's always the goal.
Yeah, while still making an impact.
While making an impact. Yeah.
Last question. What excites you? I mean, building on what you've already said, but like what excites you the most about the next 5 years, next 10 years, personally and professionally?
Professionally, I'll say first, like really like getting into and sharing some of the science behind our innovation. So the fact that it's like Everest is based in glycerin instead of water. Glycerin is a humectant. It helps hold moisture. So there's a lot of really interesting data we have about that in terms of scalp hydration and also hair health that we can start to speak to. So that is, I think, really kind of this more tech angle that comes along with the innovation. That's really the next frontier of the brand. And then I think personally, like one thing I love is just like getting to know other founders and founders at different like parts of their journey as well. I think you mentioned before we started, but there's a great community of like beauty founders in Toronto. We learn so much from each other. I think we're like willing to share information. Like it's very open, which I love. And then I also love meeting people that are just like starting out on their journey. Because there's lots of, obviously, things change so quickly, but there's lots of learnings that we have that I'm always happy to share as well.
Yeah. Do you have a crew of other founders
I
in
do.
the category or not that you want to like give a shout out to?
Yeah, there's so many of them like in the beauty space. Love the founders of like Palm Hand Care, City as a fragrance brand, Guess on Earth is like a home care brand, Lawn Candles. There's some Sahajan skincare. Like there's so many. Jen from Cheekbone. Like there's so many. Three Ships, Connie and Laura, amazing. Yeah, there's so many. I'm sure I'm forgetting. Graydon is one of the OGs. Like we have a whole, chat group where everybody shares kind of resources and information. So I feel so fortunate because I think that is what has made it really worthwhile and also has really helped us, move quicker and learn faster as we've started this journey.
And it's so great to see the collaboration between
100%.
founders and not, keeping, no
gatekeeping.
No gatekeeping. Everyone, there's space for everyone.
Yeah.
Everyone's has a different perspective.
Yeah.
Truly, I do think, and I feel like the category, just beauty in general, is just killing it. And everyone has a distinct story that I've witnessed and a different vibe to their brand. And there's room for everyone.
Yeah.
It's so great to see.
It's great. I love it.
Well, thank you so much for coming in on a Friday.
Thank you.
To chat with us. And I just loved learning more about your journey and have been a fan of the brand since I remember when you guys launched. And it's great to see just how much you've built with a whole pandemic and a whole other things happening in between. Lots happened since
it's been
day
wild.
one.
Yeah, exactly.
So
we're going to be bulletproof by the end of this.
Yeah. It's a masterclass in resilience.
Exactly, in real time.
But thank you so much for coming in. I really appreciate it.
It was such a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to this episode of Mission Critical. If you enjoyed our discussion, make sure to hit like below and subscribe for more updates from our show. Until next time, stay sharp, stay curious, and go make something happen. We'll see you on the next episode.